Hello, it's 7:30 in the morning and today I'm going to attempt to build a log store in just one day using scraps of salvaged and leftover pressure treated timber, and I'm going to attempt to do it with limited tools and without my workshop. I'm going to do everything outside because it's supposed to be a nice day. This might not be everything I use, but this is what I'm going to try and stick to as much as possible. And the first job is to pull out all of the materials that I have available to work with.
By the way, that pile of new timber on the floor was ordered for another upcoming project, so I'm not going to allow myself to use any of that. I'm only going to work with scraps, offcuts, salvaged timber and stuff left over from past projects to clear some space in my timber store. And I organised it so that I can figure out what I have to work with, as that's going to dictate how big I can make it.
So timber is all sorted. I've got some 3x3 posts. All of this here is 3x2s. This I think is 5 or 6x2. I've got some gravel boards, some capping pieces and battens that are so twisted that I doubt I'm going to be able to use those. All of this is 4x2, and then on the end I've got some decking boards that were left over from a recent gate project. This is where the log store is going to live. You might remember there used to be a window up here, but I blocked and rendered and pebble dashed that up in a recent video. And I need to measure up how much space I've got to work with. And I've got 2.9 meters, so what's that? Just over 8 feet.
I spent about 15 minutes just figuring out a rough plan of action because I'm not going to draw up any plans for this build. I was in the mood just for building on the fly. I decided to use the 4x2s for the shelf frames to hold the timber because the span of the store is going to be quite long and these will be less likely to sag compared with the 3x2s that I had. I'm cutting clean ends to all my workpieces first using a speed square to guide the circular saw, and I'm going to dip the ends in some wood preserver for 5 to 10 minutes, which will help protect the timber from rot and insects. The end grain is really going to soak it up. I'm using polyurethane wood glue and some coach screws to assemble 2 identical shelf frames with some noggins in between, just to keep them as rigid as possible. You can see from this footage that the timber that I'm using is twisted and warped, but I can't afford to be picky with it. This is all I have to work with, so I'll just have to hope that I can force it into shape later when it comes to assembly. I'll use the 3x2s to make 2 frames which will hold the shelves, and this is a similar process again, cutting the uprights to length and giving them a dip in the treatment, but this time I'll need to measure how long I want the noggins to be, as I want the frames to be the same width as my shelves. Holding the 2 uprights flush with the back of the shelf frames and measuring what's left is the quickest way to do that. Those 2 identical frames got assembled in the same way, but I was running low on coach screws, so I used some decking screws here as well. And here's Mickey checking out what's going on in the garden. With those 4 frames made up, I can position everything ready to assemble it all, and I'm going to get plenty of glue in between the side frames and the shelf frames.
So I've got a bit of a problem. The plan was to glue and bolt the shelves to the uprights, but I thought I had way more bolts than I actually have, and I don't have enough. So unfortunately I've had to break the limited tools rule, and I've got out some clamps, which are just going to hold things nice and tight until the glue dries, and then I can add some bolts later for extra strength.
I mentioned earlier that the timber was twisted, so here you can see I'm using a squeeze clamp to force it to where I want it to be before clamping it in place.
I have got some of these M8 hex head coach screws, which are far from ideal as they're too long, and obviously I can't put a nut on the end of these, but for the sake of getting the job done and saving me having to go and buy some, I'm tempted just to use these.
So I decided to try and add one of these just to see if it would cinch down nice and tight, and as you can see it did the job nicely, so that's what I'm going to use. I'll add 3 to support each end of the shelves. I didn't want to leave those screws poking through though, so I'm breaking the limited tool rule again here using the angle grinder. Now I'm thinking about what timber to use to finish off the frame, and I wanted to use this piece at the front, but as you can see it's really twisted. So instead I'm going to use my remaining bits of 3x2, two of which I'm going to laminate and screw together. And I still had plenty of short 4x2 bits that I can use as noggins. And another bit of 3x2 at the back to complete what will be the roof frame. I used a clamp just to hold the roof frame in place on one end, and then I can kind of flex and force it in place again because of how twisted the timber was. And I can make use of more of these short bits of 4x2 by cutting some 45-degree ends, which I can secure to the frame just to keep it nice and rigid and prevent it from racking from side to side. I'd ran out of the polyurethane glue at this point, so screws alone will have to do. Lunchtime was spent at a local timber yard to pick up some timber to use for the shelves, as I didn't have anything suitable in storage. So I bought 6 new gravel boards and also a couple of battens. I'll show you what the battens are for a little bit later on. When I got back I could scrape away all of the foamed up polyurethane glue, and I guess this is me breaking the limited tool rule yet again with my carbide scraper. So while I eat my lunch I thought I should explain why I'm making this firewood store and also why I'm trying to do it in a day. Just like everyone else in the UK, we are getting sick and tired of paying extortionate energy prices. With prices set to rise again in October, we decided to invest in a wood burning stove so that we could be a little bit more self-sufficient. And obviously being a woodworker, I have a constant supply of firewood, so it just kind of makes sense. Why am I trying to get the build done in one day? Well, at the moment I've got piles and piles of salvaged wood which I have nowhere else to put, and it's right in the way of where some scaffolding will need to be erected soon, as we're about to start working on re-roofing our bungalow. So I want to get this one done quickly so that I can get all of that timber moved out of the way and stored. Before this thing gets any heavier than it already is, I'm going to move it closer to where it's going to live. So here are the new gravel boards that will make up the shelves, and I'm going to notch out the one at the front to fit around the uprights. And I'm resisting the urge to get my jigsaw by making the cuts with my circular saw, although I did have to grab a chisel to clean up the corners. Then using up my last bits of 4x2, I want to cut some fairing strips to give the roof a slope so that rain runs off it. This gives me 2 usable pieces just by making one diagonal cut. To sheathe the roof, I've got some salvaged OSB, and I can only assume this was once someone's tool wall. I got it when I picked up all this salvaged timber from a shed demolition. I'm going to need 2 bits of this OSB to make up enough length for the roof, and I'm going to use up some of the old twisted bits of batten around the edge. I just had to cut it into several shorter pieces to remove as much of the twist as possible.
So this is definitely a bit of a bodge. This is made up of 8 bits of batten in total. And I've also added a little joining plate in the middle just to keep the 2 panels aligned. Am I proud of this roof? Definitely not. Is it going to do the job? Yes.
You might have seen earlier in the video that there were a few rose bushes right where I wanted the firewood store to be placed. And I've got to thank my wife Ria for pulling them out for me as I was running out of time. To be honest, I never liked them anyway, they won't be missed. I was forever getting my clothes snagged on the prickly little gits. So let's see if the roof fits. Yep, that'll do the job nicely. I'm going to use these bits of decking boards as cladding for the sides. I just need to cut them to length. And then this top piece slots in underneath the roof overhang where I can scribe the angle of the roof onto it and then cut it out to fit. And then I need to do some quick maths to figure out an equal spacing between each piece. And I cut these 80mm spacer blocks to help speed things up. These gaps between the cladding will allow loads of airflow to allow the firewood to dry out. I can then get my roof secured in place. Now for these small battens I bought from the timber yard earlier, I'm going to use these as trim pieces just to cover up the end grain of the cladding on the sides. I just think it helps to make them look tidier and it'll help protect from the weather. And yes, that's a hammer. Perhaps this isn't much of a limited tools build after all. Then I went looking for a roll of roof felt that I had left over from my shed build, and this is where things took a turn for the worse.
So I was hoping to get the roof felted today as well, but I'm not entirely sure that I want to use that stuff. It's definitely past its best. So I think I'm going to call this one done for now. I kind of built a log store in a day, kind of with limited tools. I don't know, you can be the judge of that one yourself. But it's been a long day and I'm knackered, so I'm going to call it there. And I'll do a follow-up to this video just to finish things off. Please subscribe for more videos if you'd like to help support the channel. You can find links to my Patreon and YouTube channel membership in the description box below, where you can get early access to my videos, exclusive content, free project plans and cut lists, and a name credit at the end of my videos. Thank you for watching.